the most famous teacher who ever lived, almost never gave a straight answer. Ask him who your neighbor is, and he tells you about a man beaten and left in a ditch. Ask him what God is like, and he points to a father sprinting down a road, robe hitched up, undignified, weeping. Ask him about the kingdom of heaven, and he starts talking about a seed, a little yeast, a net full of fish, small stories. Dirt and bread and coins and weddings. Peasants understood them at once. Scholars are still arguing about them 2,000 years later. And here is the strangest part of all. When his closest followers asked him why he taught this way, he gave an answer that has unsettled people ever since. He said he told these stories so that some people would look and not see, listen and never understand, on purpose. He built his little stories to reveal and to hide in the very same breath. These stories are called parables. An earthly story with a heavenly meaning, a window and a wall in the same sentence. There are around 40 of them, depending on how you count. Here is my promise to you. By the end of these 20 minutes, you will see how all of them fit together into one picture, a picture of a kingdom and of the heart of the God who told them. So let's begin with the question his own disciples asked. Why stories at all? The word we translate parable comes from a Greek word, parabolic. It means, literally, something thrown alongside. You take something familiar, a farmer, a coin, a lost sheep, and you throw it down next to something you cannot see. The kingdom of God, the human heart, eternity itself. The ordinary thing becomes a handle for the thing too large to grasp on its own. Jesus did not invent this. Prophets and rabbis told parables. Long before, the prophet Nathan trapped King David with one, before David realized the story was about himself. But no one taught the way Jesus did. For him, the parables were never decoration on the lesson. They were the lesson. Mark tells us that, to the crowds, he did not speak to them without a parable. And one day, after a long afternoon of these stories, his disciples finally asked the obvious thing. Why? Why speak to them this way? His answer is one of the hardest sentences in the Gospels. To you, he tells his followers, it has been given to know the secrets of the kingdom of heaven, but to them it has not been given. To some, the very same story is a key. To others, a locked door. Because that is what a parable does. It does not force its way in, it waits to be wanted. It will not argue with you. It simply hands you a picture and lets you decide what to do with it. Come with a soft heart, and it opens. Come to trap him, and it closes, and you walk away thinking it was only a nice little story about farming. Jesus quotes the prophet Isaiah to explain it. This people's heart has grown dull. Seeing, they do not see. Hearing, they do not understand. The parables sort the crowd, not by how clever a person is, by whether a person actually wants the truth. So keep that in mind as we walk through them. A parable never only asks, do you understand? It asks, do you want to? He begins, fittingly, with a story about beginnings, about a farmer scattering seed. A farmer went out to sow, and as he scattered the seed by hand, it fell on 4 different kinds of ground. Some fell on the hard path, packed down by feet, and the birds came and ate it up. Some fell on rocky ground where the soil was thin. It sprang up fast and withered just as fast because it had no root. Some fell among thorns, and the thorns grew up and choked it before it could bear anything. And some fell on good soil and produced a crop, 30, 60, 100 times what was sown. Same seed, same sower. 4 different results. The only thing that changed was the ground. Then Jesus does something rare. He pulls his disciples aside and explains it. The seed, he says, is the word of the kingdom. and the 4 soils are 4 kinds of human heart. The hard path is the heart that never lets it in. The rocky ground is shallow joy that dies under pressure. The thorns are a heart crowded out by worry and wealth. And the good soil hears and holds on and bears fruit. Notice what the parable makes you do. It makes you ask which soil you are. This is the parable of the sower, and it is really the parable about all the parables. Everything depends on the soil. The next story stays in the field, but adds an enemy. A man sowed good seed in his field, but while everyone slept, his enemy came and sowed weeds among the wheat and slipped away. The 2 grew up together, tangled root to root. And the servants asked, "Should we go and pull the weeds now?" "No," the master says, "you will tear up the wheat with them. Let both grow together until the harvest." It is a parable about patience, about a world where good and evil grow side by side, and the sorting is not ours to do. The harvest will come. The judgment is real, but it belongs to God in His time, not to us in our impatience. Then the kingdom shrinks to something you could lose in the crease of your palm. The kingdom of heaven, Jesus says, is like a mustard seed, the smallest of all the seeds. But when it grows, it becomes the largest of the garden plants, a tree where the birds of the air come and nest in its branches. This is how the kingdom comes. Not with an army, not overnight, small, hidden, almost invisible, and then unstoppable. Then an even quieter image, a woman baking bread. The kingdom of heaven is like leaven, which a woman took and hid in 3 measures of flour until it was all leavened. A pinch of yeast, working silently through a huge batch of dough until the whole thing was changed from the inside out. The next 2 stories are about what the kingdom is worth. Each is only 1 sentence long. The kingdom of heaven is like treasure hidden in a field, which a man found and covered back up. And then, in his joy, he goes and sells everything he has and buys that field. Notice the word joy. He does not sell it all with a heavy heart. He has found something worth more than everything else he owns, and letting the rest go feels like winning. The second story is its mirror. A merchant, this time. A professional, spending his life in search of fine pearls. And on finding 1 pearl of great value, he went and sold all that he had and bought it. One man stumbles on the treasure by accident. The other searches for it for years. Both end the same way, giving up everything for the one thing that is worth it. The last kingdom parable in this set returns to judgment and to the sea. The kingdom is like a great net thrown into the water, gathering fish of every kind. And when it was full, they dragged it ashore and sorted the good from the bad. The net catches everything, but there is a sorting at the end. Being in the crowd is not the same as being the real thing, a warning tucked inside a fishing story. Now the scene changes. And to understand the next stories, you have to picture who Jesus was talking to. The religious leaders were grumbling. "This man," they said, "receives sinners and eats with them." So Jesus tells 3 stories in a row, all about the same thing, something lost, and the joy of finding it. A shepherd has 100 sheep and loses one, and he leaves the 99 in the open country and goes after the one that is lost until he finds it. When he finds it, he does not scold it. He lays it on his shoulders, rejoicing, and carries it all the way home. And there is more joy in heaven, Jesus says, over 1 sinner who repents than over 99 who think they need no repentance. Then a woman with 10 silver coins loses one. She lights a lamp, sweeps the whole house, and searches carefully until she finds it. And when she does, she calls her friends together. "Rejoice with me," she says, "for I have found what I lost." 2 small stories, 1 point. God is not a reluctant God who has to be talked into loving you. He is the one doing the searching. And then he tells the greatest short story ever told. A man had 2 sons, And the younger one came to him and said, "Father, give me my share of the inheritance." Now, think about what that meant. Give me my share now was, in effect, saying, I wish you were dead. I want your things, not you. And the father, astonishingly, divides the property and lets the boy go. The son takes the money to a far country and burns through all of it on reckless living. Then a famine hits, and the boy who wanted to be free ends up in a pigsty, feeding pigs, so hungry he envies the slop they eat. For a Jewish audience, this is as low as a person can fall. A son of Abraham, starving among unclean animals. And there, in the mud, the text says, he came to himself. He rehearses a little speech. "Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me one of your hired servants." And he turns for home, expecting, at best, a job. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him. Which means the father had been watching that road every day since the morning the boy left. And the father runs. In that culture, a dignified old man did not run. To run, he had to lift his robe and bare his legs, the posture of a child or a servant. He runs anyway. He does not care how it looks. He falls on his son's neck and kisses him. The son begins his speech, "I am no longer worthy," and the father will not even let him get to the part about becoming a servant. Bring the best robe, a ring for his hand, shoes for his feet. Kill the fattened calf. For this, my son was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. This is Jesus' answer to the sneer that he eats with sinners. This, he says, is what God is like. But the story is not over. There is a second son, the older one, and he is furious. He has done everything right, and no one ever threw him a party. He stands outside the celebration, refusing to go in. And the father comes out to him too, comes out to both his sons. "Son," he says, "everything I have is yours. But we had to celebrate. Your brother was dead and is alive." And there, Jesus leaves it. He never tells us whether the older brother went in, because the older brothers were standing right in front of him, the grumbling, respectable men. The invitation hangs in the air, unanswered. Will you come in? There is one more story of grace crossing a line, and it starts with a lawyer trying to justify himself. "Who," he asks, "is my neighbor?" And Jesus answers with a road. A man goes down from Jerusalem to Jericho and falls among robbers, who strip him, beat him, and leave him half dead. A priest comes down that road. He sees the man, and he passes by on the other side. Then a Levite, a temple assistant, comes. Same thing. He looks and crosses to the far side of the road. The two men you would most expect to help walk straight past a dying man. Then comes a Samaritan. And you have to understand, to Jesus' audience, Samaritan was almost a slur. The despised half-outsiders, the wrong kind of people. And the Samaritan is the one who stops. Who has compassion? He bandages the wounds, pours on oil and wine, sets the man on his own animal, and pays an innkeeper to care for him. Then Jesus turns the lawyer's question inside out. The man had asked, "Who counts as my neighbor?" Jesus asks, "Who was a neighbor to the man in the ditch?" And the answer is, the one nobody wanted it to be. "Go," Jesus says, "and do likewise." Grace is the beating heart of the parables. But it is not the whole of them. Because grace that is real can also be refused, and many of the parables are urgent warnings about being ready. A rich man's land produces a harvest bigger than his barns can hold. So he says to himself, "I will tear down my barns and build bigger ones, and store it all up, and say to my soul, relax, eat, drink, be merry." He uses the word soul, but he has only ever fed his body, and he is planning for years he simply assumes he has. And God says to him, "Fool, This very night your soul is required of you. And all the things you have stored, whose will they be? He was rich toward himself, Jesus says, and not rich toward God. Then a story about waiting, and about a door that closes. 10 young women take their lamps out to meet a bridegroom for a wedding. 5 of them are wise. 5 are foolish. The wise ones bring extra oil. The foolish ones bring only their lamps and no reserve. The bridegroom is delayed, hour after hour, and every one of them falls asleep. At midnight, the cry goes up, "He is here," and the foolish find their lamps sputtering out, with no oil left to burn. They rush off to buy more, and while they are gone, the bridegroom arrives, and the door is shut. When they come back knocking, the answer from inside is terrible. "I do not know you. Watch therefore," Jesus says, "for you know neither the day nor the hour." Some things cannot be borrowed at the last minute. The next parable is about what you do with the waiting. A master goes on a journey and entrusts his wealth to 3 servants, 5 talents to one, 2 to another, and 1 to the last, each according to his ability. And a talent was an enormous sum, years and years of wages. Even the servant with 1 was handed a small fortune. The first 2 put the money to work and double it. The third digs a hole and buries his in the ground out of fear. When the master returns, he says to the first 2, "Well done, good and faithful servant. Enter into the joy of your master." But the third has nothing to show but the buried coin and an excuse. "I was afraid." And that fear, the refusal to risk anything, to do anything with what he was given, is the thing condemned. The kingdom is a trust to be spent, not a treasure to be buried. Then the curtain rises on the end of all things. This one is less a parable than a picture of the Last Judgment, but Jesus frames it with a shepherd's image. The Son of Man comes in glory and gathers all the nations before him, and separates them the way a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. To the sheep on his right he says, "Come, inherit the kingdom. For I was hungry, and you fed me, thirsty, and you gave me drink, a stranger, and you welcomed me, naked, and you clothed me, sick and in prison, and you came to me." And they are baffled. "Lord," they say, "when did we ever see you hungry or in prison?" And the king answers, "As you did it to one of the least of these my brothers, you did it to me." He hides himself in the hungry, and the stranger, and the prisoner. Whatever you do to the least, you do to him. The most vivid warning of all is a story about 2 men and a great reversal on the far side of death. A rich man dresses in purple and fine linen and feasts every single day, and at his gate lies a beggar named Lazarus, covered in sores, longing for the scraps. This is the only character Jesus ever names in a parable. The rich man is anonymous. The beggar has a name. That already is the whole point. Both men die. Lazarus is carried to Abraham's side. The rich man finds himself in torment, and he lifts up his eyes, and for the first time he sees Lazarus. He had stepped over him at his gate every day and never once truly seen him. Between them, Abraham says, a great chasm has been fixed. The distance the rich man kept in life has simply hardened into eternity. He begs that someone be sent to warn his brothers, and Abraham answers, "They have Moses and the prophets. Let them listen to them." If they will not hear the scripture they already have, they will not be convinced even if someone rises from the dead. A haunting line from the lips of the one who would. One last warning parable about a king and an invitation refused. A king throws a wedding feast for his son and sends his servants to call the invited guests, and they will not come. Some just ignore it and go back to their business. Some seize the servants and mistreat them. So the king sends his servants out into the streets to gather everyone they can find, both bad and good, until the wedding hall is full. The invitation the expected guests spurned is thrown wide open to everyone else. Many are called, Jesus says, but few are chosen. The door is open to all, but you have to actually walk through it. Some of the parables are not about the kingdom out there at all. They are about the small daily posture of the heart before God, especially in prayer. There was a judge, Jesus says, who neither feared God nor cared about people. And a widow with no power, no leverage, nothing to bribe him with, keeps coming to him. "Give me justice," she says, "against my adversary." He refuses, and refuses, and then, finally, worn down, he gives in, just to be rid of her. And here is the argument. If even a corrupt judge will answer sheer persistence, how much more will a good father answer his own children who cry out to him day and night? He told this one, Luke says, so that they would always pray and not lose heart. The very next parable is about how not to pray. Two men go up to the temple. One is a Pharisee, respected, disciplined, religiously flawless. The other is a tax collector, a traitor, a collaborator, despised by everyone. The Pharisee prays, "God, I thank you that I am not like other men, not like this tax collector. I fast. I give a tenth of everything." His whole prayer is a mirror. He is only ever talking about himself. The tax collector will not even lift his eyes. He beats his chest and says just 7 words. "God, be merciful to me, a sinner." And Jesus says it was the tax collector, not the religious one, who went home justified before God. Everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, and the one who humbles himself will be lifted up. The prayer God answers is the empty-handed one. There is a smaller companion to these. A man who bangs on his neighbor's door at midnight, needing bread for a guest who has just arrived. The neighbor is already in bed and says, "No, go away." But the man keeps knocking shamelessly until the neighbor gets up and gives him whatever he needs. Ask, Jesus says. Seek, knock. Not because God is a reluctant sleeper who has to be pestered, but because he is the very opposite. If even reluctance gives in to persistence, how much more will love? There is one theme left, and it may be the hardest of all: forgiveness. The kind you receive, and the kind you are then expected to give. Peter comes and asks, "Lord, how many times should I forgive someone who sins against me? 7 times? He thinks he is being generous. Not 7 times, Jesus says, 70 times 7, which is his way of saying, stop counting. And then the parable. A servant owes his king 10,000 talents. An absurd, impossible debt, more than a whole kingdom earns. He could not repay it in 100 lifetimes. He falls down and begs for time, and the king, moved with pity, does far more than he asked. He cancels the entire debt, wipes it clean away, and that same servant walks straight out and finds a fellow servant who owes him 100 denarii, a few months' wages, a real debt, but a payable one. And he grabs the man by the throat. "Pay what you owe." And he throws him into prison until he can produce every last coin. When the king hears of it, he is furious. "I forgave you everything," he says. "Should you not have had mercy on your fellow servant, as I had mercy on you?" The forgiven servant had become the unforgiving one. And the parable ends with the sharpest warning Jesus ever gave about a hard and ungrateful heart. A quieter parable makes the same point from the other side. 2 men owe a moneylender. One owes 500 coins, the other owes 50, and he forgives them both. Which of them, Jesus asks, will love him more? The one, of course, who was forgiven more. The size of your gratitude is the size of the debt you know was canceled. And one last parable, about a grace that offends our arithmetic. A landowner goes out at dawn and hires workers for his vineyard, agreeing to pay them a denarius for the day. Through the day, he goes back and hires more. At 9 in the morning, at noon, at 3, And even at 5 o'clock, with barely an hour of daylight left. At sunset, he pays them all, and he starts with the last ones hired, and he gives every one of them the same full denarius. And the ones who worked the whole day in the heat are outraged. It is not fair. And the owner answers, "Friend, I have done you no wrong. You agreed to a denarius. Take what is yours and go. Are you envious because I am generous?" The kingdom does not run on wages. It runs on grace. And grace to those who are sure they have earned their place will always look like an injustice. So step back now and look at all of them together. What do the parables show us about the kingdom? That it comes small and hidden, a seed, a bit of yeast, and grows past all stomping. That it grows up among the weeds and will not be sorted until the harvest, and that it is worth everything you own. And what do they show us about God? That He is the shepherd who leaves the 99 to go after the one, the woman who sweeps all night for a single coin, the father who runs down the road, the king who fills his hall from the streets, the landowner who pays the latecomer a full day's wage. But there is always a door, and the door does not stay open forever. The rich man's chasm, the shut door at midnight, the talent buried in the ground. That is why the parables never let you stay a spectator. Each one, in the end, turns into a mirror. The Pharisee or the tax collector, the older brother or the younger, the good soil or the hard and trodden path. Jesus rarely ends these stories with an answer. He ends them with a question, left hanging in the air, aimed directly at you. An earthly story, quietly opening a door into heaven. So which one are you, and what will you do now that you have heard?